Casey Gray here from the Conscious Builder, and on this video we're doing a short clip from an interview that I did with Stephen King, who is the CEO of GrowthForce, who is the nation's largest cloud-based accounting services. In this video he talks about the biggest mistake that contractors make.
Yeah, I've been a CPA advising small businesses for 36 years. And the single biggest mistake that I see is that business owners think they can sell their way to profits. And I just yesterday had a conversation with the business, 6.6 million in revenue and 2.4% profit, $150,000 of profit, split among 3 guys. And they're like, we are working way too hard for not enough money. And what I showed them was, what's your plan? It's like, we think we can continue to grow like we did last year, 10% a year. And we're putting together a 3-year scenario plan. I said, okay, so that gets you to $8 million in 3 years. But if you don't change your pricing or you don't lower your overhead, you're still going to make 2.4% profit. You're going to make $200,000 on $8 million of revenue instead of $400,000 or $500,000. So the mistake is to think growing the top line will grow the bottom line. You have to focus on the margins.
You have to focus on that bottom line first. So how would you go through? So if you started working with this company, what would be your steps? Would they be looking at the overhead? Would you be looking at price structure? Like how would you go about helping? So if somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, you know what, that sounds like me. Maybe they're doing 2 million, 3 million, I don't know. But they're like, you know what, I'm not making the money that I thought I was going to be making, or the paper says I'm making a profit, but I don't know where the profit is. It's not in my bank.
Where did the cash go is one of my favorite conversations because it's eye-opening. So I'll tell you what we did yesterday, because this is really prototypical. What we talked about first was where's reality, right? So that's your first step is, what does that data tell you, right? You have to make data-driven decisions. You have to look at reality. And what we do is we use a company scorecard that shows you a 2-year trend of the 5 most important drivers of every business. We show you your gross profit, your top line. Sorry, your gross revenue, your top line. We show you your gross profit dollars, and we show you your gross profit percentage, which to me is the most important number on every company. And then we show you your net income dollars and your net income percentage. And the focus here is looking at where are you now? What was your last 12 months actuals? And then what do you think is going to happen in the next 3 years? So there's only 3 drivers to profits. You can grow the top line, you can grow your margins, your gross profit margin, or you can lower your overhead. Most business owners know that rule, right? If you want to increase profits, there's one of 2 things you could do. Increase revenue, decrease expenses, right? What we do is we say we got to separate those expenses into above the line expenses versus below the line. And let me kind of explain what that means. Above the line is gross profit, right? When somebody says above the line, they mean the costs that are included in calculating your gross profit. Your gross profit is your revenue minus the cost of goods to deliver that revenue, your cost of goods sold, your COGS.
So that's none of your expenses that it takes to run your business. Correct.
Yeah, those are only the direct expenses that the customer paid for. Without those direct expenses, you would not have earned that customer's revenue. So it's the labor, the direct labor, the guys swinging the hammers. It's the direct materials, the stuff that you had to buy to finish the job. Those are all direct expenses. Those are in cost of goods sold above the calculation for gross profit. Revenue minus cost of goods sold is gross profit. Everything else is indirect. It's overhead. It's below the line. The customer is not paying for your rent, your IT, your accountant, your HR, your lawyers. Those are all overhead expenses. And so what you've got to do is not focus on growing your top line, and you said it, Casey, you said it, put profits first. So what we do is we go in and we say, okay, what is your target net income? Let's start there. And these guys were like, okay, we want to make 15% profit. Fantastic. Now, the next step is to figure out how much gross profit do you need in order to make that net income? These guys needed to make 45% gross profit to make 15% net income. They're like, there's no way we're going to get 45% margins in our industry. It's not possible. They're at 33% right now. So we said, okay, without lowering your overhead, we're going to come back to that as the second decision. The first decision here is how much margin do you want to make? If everything else stays the same, if your overhead stays the same, I should say, then what's more realistic gross profit percentage? They said, we think we should be at 40%. That's our industry standard. I said, okay, great. We plugged into our calculator. A 40% gross profit will net you 10% to the bottom line, 10% net income. They're like, okay, that would be great, because we're $6.6 million business. That's $660,000 as opposed to 150. And so now you start to look at realism. What can we really do in our business, in our industry? And then you work backwards from there. How do you get to 40% margin? How do you get from 33% to 40? Well, what we then suggest you do is you're going to go through and calculate what is the actual gross profit on every job you've done. Now, these guys are project-based, right? They don't have any recurring revenue. So what we did was we implemented T-Sheets, which is a time tracking system. It's magic. You pick up a phone. It has a geo solution. Your workers show up on site. It automatically pops up as they get there and say, hey, I've seen you've shown up at the Casey Gray household. Are you ready to start your time sheet? Yes, I am. Okay, great. What are you doing today? And it lists the services that you offer. Are you doing demo? Are you doing sheetrock? Are you doing plumbing? Are you doing electrical? And then, is this a in-scope job, meaning this is part of the project, or is this a work order? Because one of the biggest mistakes that people have is time leakage, time that they're paying for, but they're not getting paid for. And so if you create a tracking system where you can say, look, if it's out of scope, if you thought you were just going to demo the walls, but all of a sudden there was asbestos up there, okay, we got to do a work order. We got a change order, right? And that additional billings is what makes or breaks you. Then once you understand the time, then what we did was we connected up his timesheets with his payroll. He was using Intuit Payroll. And so Intuit Payroll has baked into it activity-based costing, which is, it's a fancy word for saying that it takes the labor costs, divides it by the number of hours that they work, and it comes up with a labor cost per hour paid. And then it magically, it's amazing that it's built into Intuit Payroll, and Insperity is a PEO. It's also automated with them. They're the only two that have it fully automated. When you run the payroll, it'll allocate the labor costs based on how people filled out the timesheets. And it'll post it back inside QuickBooks. So now you can see labor cost per customer, per job, labor cost per service that you delivered. And now you can see profitability by customer, by job, by service. And now it's magic. Now what we did was we did a report that showed you, show me the jobs. They actually had 6% of their clients they lost money on. And so the first thing we did was, okay, stop doing that. You're subsidizing. And they had a wiring project that they were bidding wrong, and they just stopped doing it. It was a special kind of in-house wiring that they just didn't know how to do. They stopped doing those works. Then what we do is we look at and we say, all right, how many jobs are you going to do in a year? And let's say it's 1,000 jobs. How much profit do you want to make? Because it's profit first. Most business owners, they figure out pricing. How much revenue am I going to get? Then what does it cost me to deliver it? Okay, that's how much I need to price. If I want to make 50% margin, I got to double my costs. We're suggesting you reverse it. You start with the bottom line. How much profit do you want to make? These guys, like, okay, we want to make a $500,000, right? 1,000 jobs. That means you need to make $500 per job. And what happens is when you start thinking that way, when the estimator comes in and says, look, this is a competitive situation here. If I can give them a 10% discount, I can close this. And then we'll get it. It'll help our cash flow because I'll get the deposit check and I got these workers waiting to do something, and let's just keep everybody busy. And if these guys are a good referral partner, they'll refer us to other neighbors or whatever. There's a justification for giving them a small discount. And what I find is that single decision is what causes people to have cash flow problems. It causes them to not make the profit that they want for their hard work at the end of the year. Because if you don't make 10% profit on each job, you can't make it up in volume.
Right.
So that's the first step, is what's the profit per job? And then what we do is we look and say, how much overhead do you have? You got $1 million worth of overhead? Okay, we got $1,000 worth of overhead. If you have 1,000 jobs, we have $1,000 worth of overhead that each job needs to cover. So then after looking at the jobs they actually were losing money, then we looked and says, which jobs are not covering their share of the overhead? And now you start to have a hard conversation. Are we better off being a $5 million business that's making 15% to the bottom line, or a $6 or $7 million business that's only making 5%? It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
It's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep. And so you start looking at each job and your pricing model to say, here's how much we think it's going to cost us. Now, we've got to build into this $1,000 worth of overhead and $500 worth of profit in order for us to make our nut at the end of the year.
If you want to listen to the entire interview, you can check that out here. And if you're looking to bring your business to the next level, be sure to check out ConsciousBuilderAcademy.com. There I have a free course where you can learn the 5 things that I wish I knew before I started my construction company. So until next time, remember to live consciously.